the next few years. And so we've discovered all sorts of things that no one knew about with these milkweeds. We've looked at the soil, we've examined the pH, which is really fascinating because you can have a milkweed species here that requires a pH of 8, and you can go downslope into a wetland or somewhere else, and a different milkweed species requires a pH of 4.9 or 5. So that's one reason why a lot of these milkweeds were failing in the native plant industry for growing them, because we didn't know these things. So this is your milkweed, your Florida milkweed recovery team. So I have someone representing Florida Wildflower Foundation there on my left. That is Dr. Jared Daniels on my right, monarch butterfly expert, working together to bring these plants back on the cultivation side of things, on the roadside conservation side of things, so on and so forth. We have grown plants, hundreds of thousands of plants. I have come down here and driven roadsides to find what are sometimes the last of their kind in a county. There are some milkweed species in Orange County and in surrounding counties where the last of their kind is found in a single ditch, 20 plants. And so we come in and we carefully and ethically collect a percentage of those seeds and produce hundreds and thousands of them. And then look for recipient sites at state parks, at WMAs, at extension offices, wherever, so that we can get that genetic diversity back there in the ground. And that's what we do all of the time. Lots and lots of places. So some of the plants we're growing. We grow milkweed vines. There are a number of milkweed vines found throughout the state, and except for some of the ones that are found in southern Florida that are tropical, every single milkweed vine found in this region, including the ones in this county, are all listed themselves as endangered or threatened, and monarchs love them. So we grow a lot of different milkweed vines. They're very interesting. Clasping milkweed, Asclepias and plexicollis, relatively easy to grow if once you know how to grow it. Which took us some time. Asclepias cinerea, the purple milkweed, probably was more common than we commonly think that it was not. So Asclepias conivens, large flower milkweed. Some of the best stations of this that I've seen are in Tosahatchee, just east of here. There's some pretty good populations of this. There's some around Christmas. But it's overall declining species. Curtis's milkweed is a narrowly endemic endangered species found in scrubs. Anywhere you drive through this area, if you see a little spot with white sand and sand pine popping out of it, there's a very high likelihood it probably has a Curtis's milkweed growing in there, along with a lot of other really, really rare species. Asclepias speyi is a very narrowly endemic species that we are cultivating and researching, trying to understand what's going on with it. There's a grad student named Kara Driscoll who's focusing on this species right now and uncovering a lot of interesting things. Asclepias humistrata, the sandhill milkweed, it took us the better part of 5 years to figure out how to grow this milkweed. And again, this is the most important wild native milkweed. And it, up until this past year, was considered by most growers to be one of the hardest plants to cultivate in the world because it's very, very difficult. Well, it was. We now have figured out how to do it, and following that method, it works quickly and it grows fast. Asclepias incarnata, the pink swamp milkweed. So that's even though it has a lot of green dots, there are 3 populations that are okay in Central Florida. There are 4 populations in South Florida, and there is 1 little roadside on Interstate 10 with about 15 plants in North Florida. So a volunteer that works with the initiative discovered 2 of those Central Florida populations just a few months ago, just east of Orlando. And so this is a plant that is sharply declined, but yet does really well in your yard. It likes typical garden soils, front yards, is easy to grow. Asclepias lanceolata is common in wetlands throughout the state. It's sharply declining, but you can still find it in a number of places. And it's also an indicator for a very, very rare salamander, which made its first migratory movements last night. Frosted flatfoot salamander. Asclepias longifolia, there are some good places in Central Florida, typically west and southwest of here. The green swamp is a fantastic place to see this species. It's beautiful, not hard to grow, but increasingly rare in the wild. Michaud's milkweed. And so this is Savannah milkweed. We're growing this. Asclepias perennis, the aquatic milkweed, probably the easiest milkweed to grow. You can grow it by seed, you can grow it by cutting, and it'll grow in open sunlight or deep shade. Seed pods. And I have that on there because it's the only species that produces seed pods without coma hairs. Asclepias rubra, the bog milkweed. You have to plunge typically deep into pitcher plant bogs to find this species. Asclepias tomentosa. This is my favorite milkweed species for a number of reasons. And for coastal communities, this is our only saltwater tolerant milkweed species. So it often grows within view of the Atlantic or the Gulf, where it continues to persist. Asclepias tuberosa, the most widespread milkweed in the state of Florida. It still persists in a number of places, but the populations are always small and barely holding on. And these are plants that live for decades and decades and decades. And we now know how to grow these well. So these are typically readily available in a lot of places. Asclepias verticillata, the world milkweed. A lot of places in Osceola County have this plant. Red ring milkweed, Asclepias variegata. Asclepias viridiflora, the comet milkweed. This is one that we're using for applications in medians because it grows on bare limestone rock.
Really?
So it can handle the adverse conditions, and it also likes for limey soils to be present, which is usually the case when you're adjacent to roads. Asclepias viridis, the green antelope horn. So very, very odd species with a very, very odd distribution and life history. And then we grow Asclepias curasavica, but we grow it in experimental controlled plots because we're looking at monarch preferences between native milkweeds and non-native milkweeds like this one. But this is a plant that we all need to know a thing or two about that are in this room right now. And so a few things to keep in mind about tropical milkweed, non-native milkweed. Okay, so for one, it's not native. So you can go out and find this all over the place. That is a colony of them that has established right there in that roadside. Here's another population of them. These are very, very far away from people. So don't think that they're just popping up and recruiting in areas adjacent to your house. So they do have what appears to be a growing invasive potential in the state. So from an ecological perspective, that's a bit of a problem until we understand it better, what's going on. But a few things to keep in mind if you're using this milkweed. One, I urge you to use this milkweed as a conservation tool for monarch butterflies while you transition into having a yard that is predominantly native milkweeds. And the reason why that's important is because this plant causes problems for monarch butterflies, particularly monarch butterflies that are migrating. The OE that I talked about earlier, the primary means that butterflies are infected with OE is when they land on a milkweed plant and a female, or usually a female, had previously landed on it and inoculated that milkweed with the OE. And so then that's how it spreads to all of the monarchs in a given population, and they all get infected. Our native milkweeds are temperate species. In other words, they're programmed to go underground half the year. When the milkweed goes underground, it kills the OE and the OE goes away. And so the issue with this milkweed is that it is an evergreen species. And so the OE burden just keeps building up and building up and building up. In regions like Miami-Dade County, it is assumed that virtually every single monarch that you see has been infected with OE because there's so many wild populations of this milkweed and they never die back. And so that's a problem. And even though we know that there's research that shows that the non-migratory monarchs found in southern Florida have come to, they've co-evolved in a short period of time with OE, monarchs that are coming down from all over the United States